And welcome back, everyone, to another edition here of Going for Two, presented by our good friends at Home Field Apparel. I am your host. I am back from the road, Matt Brown, and the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter. I'm joined here by my colleague and friend, Bryan Fischer. Bryan, how was your Halloween?
It was good. Not as many trick-or-treaters as I would have expected. I guess maybe that's kind of owing to it being on a Monday night and not kind of towards the weekend for all the little ones out there. But it got a decent haul of candy, courtesy of the Dad Tax, and I think we did pretty well in terms of the decorations and all that stuff. But now we turn the page and we are on to November, and hopefully I will. I'm sure I'm going to have to jump on the exercise bike to at least wean some of that candy off here in the future.
Dude, it's terrible. We literally got so much that I literally took half of the kids' haul and froze it. Because the four of us wouldn't be able to go through it quickly enough because we have, we each got two kids. We had church trunk or treat.
Yep.
We had the elementary school trunk or treat.
Yep.
We had the neighborhood trunk or treat, or just start trick or treating, right? And we're looking at they're like just pounds of this stuff. To the point where I'm basically throwing it out of my yard here, hoping for other people to come pick it up. Not really good if you're predisposed to just to nervous eating, as I am as somebody who works from home, which is why I have the physique of somebody that knows how to deadlift, but also knows how to spend $22 at Taco Bell. Really not a good thing here. Speaking of kids, though, there is something that my little girls have started to do over the last 2 days I thought you would really appreciate, which actually kind of dovetails into what we wanted to talk about. So they often ask to use my computer to watch YouTube. And if I'm doing something else, normally I think it's okay. We have a little curated system for them, so they're not going to get into anything too weird. But a lot of what they try to do is watch music videos of the music we might be listening to in the car and kind of following through that. We're trying to expose them to different musical genres. So my girls have recently decided that one of the artists that they're really passionate about right now is Dolly Parton. And can you guess what particular Dolly Parton song that they love the most right now that they've played almost incessantly over the last 12 hours?
I doubt it would be something like Jolene. So I'm guessing you're gonna tell me something
No,
way off of that.
It's not Jolene. That one doesn't really slap for 4-year-olds. They found a live version of her singing Rocky Top.
There you go.
It's so we had a good family conversation about where is Tennessee. My oldest, who is 8, thought it was in South America, and then guessed Wisconsin. So she could not have been more wrong on both counts. Clearly, we have some geography to do, but we've been playing this a lot, even though my children have not really spent time in that state or don't care. But maybe that's a sign, because we had our first college football playoff rankings today, as we are recording. Tomorrow, when you are listening, and lo and behold, Tennessee is number 1. I'm trying to remember, when was the last time? I mean, how often have they been ranked in this thing at all since 2014? So it's only been a couple of times, right? Never for very long.
Well, I think the 5th team to occupy the number 1 ranking here, they've all been SEC or Big Ten teams, and with Tennessee, I mean, we had an episode earlier a few weeks ago where we kind of said party like it's 1998, and that was the last time they were number 1. So yeah, it's big time there on Rocky Top, which to be fair, quite the catchy tune. I gotta say, as a college football fanatic and an observer and somebody who goes to a lot of games across the country, one of the more catchy tunes, although it does get stuck in your head after about the 9th time that they play it in the first quarter. So but it's a big thing for the Vols. I mean, I think really kind of firmly stamps them, as kind of being back, if you will, after really several years in the desert. This is a big moment for them going into Athens to play Georgia this weekend. So huge game for them in the SEC, huge game in the college football playoff race, and I think does give the Vols really a big time hope that not only if they lose this weekend, that they can still make it into the college football playoff, and that's a dangerous hope to have. Just being out there and thinking we've got it made. The college football is always really a sport that can kind of yank you back real quick and say, you know what, here's your dose of reality. So we'll see with Tennessee, but I think for all the fans in Burnt Orange, nowadays they have to be celebrating because it has been several years in the desert, and now they're finally reaping the rewards of this, somewhat controversial hire initially in Josh Heupel, but he's got a marquee win under his belt, and things are going swimmingly there in Knoxville.
I don't feel strongly about Tennessee athletics one way or the other. I think it is difficult. And I mean, if you're a Vandy fan, I can understand why you're wailing and gnashing of teeth. But if you're a neutral, I think it's hard not to be excited about this particular moment. Like you said here, okay, there's been 5 teams that have been ranked number 1.
I think that was the number. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think here. Well, Alabama's obviously one. Tennessee's one. I want to say Ohio State had that designation for a minute. Georgia, of course. And then who could forget the number 1 ranked team the first time this thing ever came out was Mississippi State. We could talk about them later, but that's pretty rarefied air to be in, even if things change and you don't necessarily make the Final Four here at the end. After the Georgia game, Tennessee's schedule is really not especially intimidating. It's Missouri and then 2 road games in South Carolina and Vandy. That's about as good as you can expect for anybody in their last 4 of the season. But given the Tennessee, and we're going to talk about another one of these programs, I think, a little bit later, was one of those athletic departments where everything happened all of the time over the last 15 years. And I don't know how this particular story will go. I don't know if this is necessarily the team I think should be the favorite to win the national championship or anything. I wouldn't say it's a flawless roster, but one of the frustrating things about the college football playoff era has been it's generally been the same goddamn teams every single time. And we're arguing about which order Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, Oklahoma get rotated in. It's nice to have some new blood in there. And it's a new blood that has a compelling emotional story, plays a compelling, unique kind of football. I think it's great. And I think this particular ranking is well-deserved given what they've accomplished so far this year.
Yeah, and I think this first set of college football playoff rankings also kind of underscores how quickly you can kind of get back into the mix, even if you have a down year. I mean, you mentioned Tennessee. We know that the trials and tribulations that they've gone through before Josh Heupel arrived. I think it does kind of underscore as well, the fact that if you get a competent athletic director, if you make a good hire in football, if you kind of get that alignment from the university side, that you can turn things around, especially in the SEC, very quickly. And that is certainly what Tennessee has done. But you add on top of that, yes, the usual suspects of Alabama and Georgia, like you mentioned, but you have TCU in there. They fired Gary Patterson last year, and lo and behold, they're undefeated this year. With TCU, I talked with Garrett Riley a little bit for my Fox Sports column on Monday. The Horned Frogs are a terrific story. You have Oregon; they've had theirs ups and downs, obviously over the years. Right back into the thick of things now. Even after that loss initially to Georgia, you have USC at number 9. I mean, they went 4-8 last year. All the teeth gnashing that you had with the USC fans over Clay Helton and just how uncompetitive they were on the national stage. Boom, they're right back in kind of to the thick of the playoff chase at number 9. LSU, another team that trailed off there at the end of the Ed Orgeron era. So, I mean, you look at the top 10, there are some fresh faces, but it's also kind of reinforcing that in this transfer portal era, especially in this NIL era, especially, you can flip that roster pretty quickly. And with some decent coaching acumen, you can have your team right back in the mix of the college football playoff. And that will be even more the case when we do have that 12-teamer.
So I'm going to make a confession here. We were just talking about this before the show started. I did not watch the show. And in this particular case, I actually had an excuse because I was in the process of making another video across the D1 Ticker family of publications. But I don't really plan on watching this show until right at the very end of the year, right? Or maybe like the week before. And part of that is, so selfishly, I don't think it makes especially compelling television. And I think it's frustrating that college football Twitter, it screams at whatever athletic director we drag out front who has to defend these decisions, knowing that person might not have voted one way or the other. And all of the explanations all kind of sound the same as dressing up for, we just put them there this way. And if you and I sat down and made a top 25 list, it would be hard for us to really, I think, really defend 17 over 21, because there's always going to be data points one way or the other. But even so, looking at the actual top 25, I have it open on the other tab here while I'm talking. There's usually still something that everyone's mad about. And with that caveat that obviously there's 5 weeks of college football left to be played. Is there anything that jumps out at this that you're like, this is an abomination, or a clear miscarriage of justice that we should be mad online about? I have one that may be, but you probably have deeper opinions about this than I do.
Well, I don't know if I'd go quite that far in terms of the abomination of justice, but as someone who does have to put together a top 25 on a weekly basis, and especially vote for a top 16 as part of the FWA poll, it can be difficult. You really are kind of splitting hairs, really kind of past 8, 9. That kind of always feels like the range where you're like, there's these basically teams are all the same, and that kind of plays out just given the amount of upsets that happen in that kind of band of ranked teams. So it can be difficult. I know going through the mock selection committee exercises and doing this kind of for real, just how the real committee does it. The way they break teams up, you can understand why they can arrive at stranger results. And then basically after they've done voting, that's when they kind of try to rationalize it. And that's where you have Boo Corrigan now, the NC State athletic director, kind of trying to explain why they voted this way or why they voted that way. And as you just spoke about, might not be the case of how Boo voted, but that might be how the committee overall feels. And that could be a 51% to 49% margin in terms of, in terms of controversy. That might be Alabama over TCU, which I know a lot of people kind of nitpicked and had their eyebrows raised. I think TCU on the field, they would be in my top 4. They were as I'm voting, but I can understand as the committee kind of breaks these teams into chunks and you start to compare really minutia of the resumes and how these teams are playing. I can understand. Maybe you thought, top four ranked wins in a row. Well, there's actually not as many ranked wins when you look at the current committee top 25. The Horned Frogs have needed to come back several weeks. It's not been the blowout city like say an Ohio State has had. So you can kind of understand how they slip down the pecking order. But I know that one caught a lot of attention from a lot of folks. And then I think out west, Pac-12 fans might quibble with the order of teams. Maybe not Oregon at the top, but in terms of USC, a couple spots ahead of UCLA, and then Utah kind of bringing up the rear behind them. I think that Pac-12 fans might have a little quibbles over that, although the way things have kind of opened up for them and having those teams in the top 10 and really the top 12, they at least have to be happy that it does look like they have a shot at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at this, and one of the nicer things I think about how the Pac-12 season has gone this year is there hasn't been as much cannibalization, and you've had a real separation, right? You can look at this and go, I know who the 4 good teams are in this conference, and there's one team that's pretty good, or however you want to categorize Oregon State, right? Like competent, and the rest of the league isn't stealing games from everybody else, which has not as been the case, which makes it hard to establish the kind of depth that you need at the top to be successful in this sort of thing. I don't have a strong opinion, honestly, about USC or UCLA. USC barely lost one game. UCLA kind of got their ass kicked. Like, I watched most of the USC Oregon game, and I don't think it was that close. And USC Utah could have gone several different ways. Both of those games had lots of moments of the Pac-12's unique interpretation of college football rules. One way or another,
which is always on display every single weekend.
Every single, we've joked about this a couple of times before, but one of the things that I deeply love about college football is that if I sit down there and I know if I spend 5-6 hours watching and watch 2 different games, there's a real chance I'm going to see something I've never seen before. And I have been watching a ton of college football, most of it professionally for the last decade, and as a human being for another decade before that. And this happens often, and it happens more often when I'm watching the Pac-12, just because it might be a rule that gets made up, or a clock malfunction, or people rushing the field 4 different times and your team's still losing. You never really know. This maybe not the best thing for your brand, but that's what it is. When I look at this, I think the only quibble I think I would make, and it's not a major miscarriage of justice or anything, based on what I've seen, I think Michigan's a better team than Clemson. And I don't think Clemson is the 4th best team in the country. I understand why you put them there because of the numbers in front of some other teams that you beat. You have to put someone there. Maybe that gets resolved by the end of the season. My lukewarm take would be, for the good of college football, I'm kind of hoping that Notre Dame or someone else knocks off this team so we can maybe get some other new blood in that top 4, because what I have seen, despite this team, the Clemson's offense improving, this feels very much like a team that just gets the shit kicked out of them by Georgia or Ohio State in the first round. And then we go through the whole expanding playoff is actually bad dialogue because of a 38-10 first round game. It would be nice if maybe that 4th team was Oregon or TCU or somebody different. My selfish opinion analysis here of the meta narrative. I mean, I get why you put Clemson, but I would just, like, based on what I've seen, I would favor Michigan if those two teams played, probably by more than 4.
Well, I'd favor the under in that game for sure, given the offenses and given the two defenses involved in that game. But I think the committee kind of did send a bit of a message, in terms of the rationale that Boo Corrigan provided was, he kind of pointedly said Michigan's non-conference schedule was a whole bag of nothing, and I think that has kind of, when you're talking about fine margins, that comes into play. Michigan not really playing outside of Penn State, not a whole lot of hefty competition there in the Big Ten just yet. They will have Illinois coming up. They will obviously have Ohio State. But in terms of Clemson, I mean, they have three top 25 wins right there in the 20s there with Syracuse, Wake, and NC State. So I can understand when you're actually putting those two teams literally on the board as they do in the committee, how you would say, just in terms of the metrics, in terms of everything, I might think Michigan is better, but when it's really head to head and it's those two, the resume is really no comparison, and so that's probably why Clemson was elevated slightly. But I totally get what you're thinking. It does kind of feel like Clemson is one of those Oklahoma teams that is really good on offense. You understand that they took care of business. Yes, they won their conference. They are one of the better teams in college football, but still there is that gap between them and kind of that top 3. And that's kind of feels where Clemson is this year. And frankly, they probably will not get tested until, they reach North Carolina, and North Carolina, even though they are in the top 20, that's another flawed team. So you could have an undefeated Clemson not getting truly tested like they should going into the college football playoff.
Yeah, it is weird how the schedules broke that way. Of course, if you had forgotten the 3 teams that Michigan has played this year, it is a real bummer because they were originally scheduled to play UCLA, which this year would have been a lot of fun, especially given how both those offenses are set up. UCLA, of course, running a former Michigan running back and a very exciting backfield. They replaced UCLA with Hawaii, I believe. Oh, and so the 3 games were Colorado State, one of the 10 worst teams in the country, Hawaii, one of the 10 worst teams in the country, and UConn, secretly conventionally bad UConn,
potential bowl team
UConn. And if UConn does go to a bowl game, I have to go. This has been communicated with our boss, and hopefully they don't play over like Christmas or something. And they did murder all 3 of those teams, but that's I think one of the most horrific out-of-conference schedules you could possibly play without playing an FCS team. I know Minnesota's might technically be worse. They had an FCS team in like New Mexico State, and I think someone, comparably terrible. But it is unusual for a championship caliber team to play like 3 teams under like 105 SP+. So you don't get the benefit of the doubt. And the way the Big Ten, their Big Ten schedule set up, like the only kind of out, you're at Ohio State, and Michigan has not won in Columbus in some time, but like their second hardest road game was Iowa, who's running half of a football team, like a bad Indiana squad. You're at Rutgers this week, which is like whatever. This Rutgers team sucks too. It is unfortunate that maybe for as good as like the upper to middle class section of the Pac-12 is this year, which I think is a positive direction for that conference. And I would argue I think that's true in the Big 12 as well. That has really not been the case in the Big 10, where I think there's very clearly 2 teams that have separated themselves, but other squads that the conference really, counts on, I think, to be, strong 12 to 30 ranked programs. Many of them are bad or have significantly fallen off. This is a not good Wisconsin team. It's not a very good Iowa team. It's a really not very good Michigan State team. And those are all, programs that you hope would, provide more of a test or more opportunity for your flagship programs. It's a good Illinois squad. And we'll learn something about Michigan on November 19th. But weird season so far in the Heartland. We'll just have to count USC and UCLA a little bit early, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is that added aspect, as you mentioned with Michigan, their future conference rivals, UCLA, playing a role in potentially keeping them out of the college football playoff. If they end up playing UCLA and winning that game early in the year, just think about if Michigan, maybe they lose a close one, maybe perhaps by a yard or something in a bad spot against Ohio State there in Columbus. What would the narrative be around Michigan?
That a bad spot.
Yeah, but I'm not saying anything about that, but think about the narrative. If they would have a top 20 win over a UCLA squad instead of that non-conference slate,
changes a lot.
It would change quite a bit, especially when you're comparing them to, an Alabama team. Yes, they did beat Texas, but it was only, a close one on the road. Maybe Texas ends up with, not getting knocked out of the top 25. They still have to play TCU. So that could be a 4 or 5 loss Texas. So, maybe when you're comparing those resumes, that game and then that series, which probably would have been canceled anyway because of Big Ten realignment, maybe it comes back to haunt the Big Ten here in 2022.
Something to just keep in the back of your mind, and also maybe to potentially, shit talk a Michigan fan in your life, or a UCLA fan if it comes to that. Certainly, any late game of the season wouldn't come down to a bad spot. All spots in the Ohio State Michigan games are good. I literally named my company, like legal name of my company, Good Spot Publishing LLC. You can look it up somewhere in the Illinois Secretary of State's office. It's fun explaining that one to the lawyers and accountants. You know what else is good besides spots? Specific spots in this particular matchup, of course, our flagship partners, Home Field Apparel. I would have worn a Tennessee shirt for this particular show. I don't have one right now. I don't really look good in orange, and not wanting to attract bias, I think, from any other team potentially in the top 25. I decided to go with Nebraska with my Bug Eater shirt. That's a safe shirt to wear when you're talking about the college football top 25 because Nebraska is not going to be anywhere in it. But the Bug Eater shirt's real cool. And I enjoy wearing that. It's a fun conversation starter. It looks like we've got an Indiana hoodie. No, Utah hoodie, not Indiana. That's right. The beautiful mountains.
Got the Utah hoodie, the number, what are they? Number 14 Utah there in the CFP rankings. And then underneath, I got my Western Kentucky shirt. So I was going to change. I was going to wear my Tulane shirt since they're the highest ranked group of 5 team, represent the AAC. I might end up having to go over before heading over to Columbus for Ohio State, Michigan. Might have to end up going to that Tulane Cincinnati game. There could be some stakes going on with that one on Black Friday. But, hey, it's fantastic for the Green Wave, and they have a set of fantastic shirts there on Home Field Apparel. And what's better than the shirt itself versus saving money? And you can do that with our promo code as well.
That's right. If your first purchase on homefieldapparel.com, and for some strange reason you've been listening to the show regularly for the past several months and haven't given them any of your money yet, use promo code Extra Points. You can save 15% off that first order. So if you want to go, maybe go pick up something up from their new Harvard Yale collection, or supporting any of our fine land grant or regional state school institutions. They may be selling stuff that says Harvard and Yale on it, but this is an Indiana company. They're in it to promote Handsome Dan. They didn't go all bourgeois elite on us or anything. They're not that kind of brand. But if you're that kind of person, you can still buy their stuff at homefieldapparel.com. There is one other thing I wanted to talk to you about here today. We would have gotten talked about this a couple of days ago. I was out of town. It has been the unexpected kind of just schedule for when we talk on these podcasts whenever a job opens up, because one has been popping up just about every week. And of course, we now have another FBS opening. This broke a couple of days ago. Auburn has now made it official and has followed through with literally the worst kept secret in the world, a move that everybody that it was anybody knew was going to be coming. They have relieved Bryan Harsin and are now looking for a new head coach. What I want to talk about I guess first is kind of maybe walking through this particular principle, because this is an example like unto Tennessee, like unto Louisville, like unto a couple other places, where the story has always been a bunch of other stuff's always happening. Auburn just brought in a completely new athletic director. They have, I think we can put it this way, a historically very active and engaged booster culture. And it has been difficult for one coach or one AD or one person to kind of centralize authority for everything. It is the closest thing to that has, I would say, over the last decade has probably been Bruce Pearl, which for many reasons is a surprise and a feat unto himself, that he is the paragon of stability and responsible distribution of power in this fan base. But I was talking to a couple other reporter friends of mine, and I wonder if we have maybe gone a little bit too far down this narrative here of just, shrugging our shoulders and going like, well, LOL Auburn, or, that crazy Auburn, when it's not like this was necessarily an unjustified move. And I don't know if there's been that many head coaches that I would say that they were fired prematurely. We may have had head coaches that were undermined or lots of drama, but I don't know if this is necessarily the place that's going to fire somebody when they didn't really necessarily get a chance to make things work. Do we? I mean, clearly the meme is born out of reality. Do you think there's a possibility that we, as a collective college football entity, have gone a little bit too far with Auburn being Auburn?
Probably a little bit, just given the narratives, around, but I mean, they're well-earned narratives, it's
Yeah.
like these things have happened, like there are stories about there's Jetgate, like you can't erase those type of things from the history of Auburn. That is what makes Auburn Auburn. And it's a very unique institution, and I'm going to be very curious to see how this plays out. I don't think, you're right. This was the most probably expected firing in the entire college football coaching carousels for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I mean, it was basically, fait accompli, going back to that kind of quasi coup that was attempted in the off season.
Yeah.
And that got the clock ticking for sure. And, it just was never quite the cultural fit, certainly with Bryan Harsin there at Auburn, never quite the on-field fit, just in terms of what they wanted to do with the personnel there, and really off the field. I mean, just yes, I think the whole SEC, knowing the SEC is a little overblown, but at the end of the day, you still got to understand that culture of going after recruits, that culture of talking with high school coaches, and I don't know if they necessarily got that right, that aspect of things right, and to say nothing of the NIL aspect, the areas they really needed to kind of hit hard in terms of grabbing players and recruiting hard. It just never worked, and I think you can kind of understand, going back to the old Jeremy Foley adage, if you understand that the firing must happen, you might as well do it immediately. Now, it was not quite immediately for sure at Auburn, but I think a lot of that was kind of the concerns that we saw, really in the wake of Bryan Harsin's firing, is that a lot of those guys, at the top levels of the staff were either inexperienced, as position coaches, or the coordinators and whatnot were a lot of his Boise State guys, and so they were going to be shown the door eventually. How hard would they work if Bryan Harsin was not around? So I think those concerns were justified, and I think it was just basically time to pull the plug. Now that they had found John Cohen as the AD, he was somebody that I was told basically, let's face it, he's a former coach himself. He was not going to be the one that was going to can a lot of these coaches. He wanted that done kind of before he officially took the job, and that was announced shortly after the decision to move on from Bryan Harsin or make a coaching change in that program. Cadillac Williams now taking over there as the interim, so going to be an interesting, I guess, close to the season. We've already seen a couple of their players enter the transfer portal, but the real thing that I kind of keep coming back to, not only with this coaching change and all the directions this coaching search is going to take. We've mentioned them a few times. We go back to Friday's episode last week when I talked with Bruce Feldman about some of the names that are going to come up with her, like Dion, like Hugh Freeze, like Lane Kiffin. The thing I really want to understand is, with a new school president, now with a new AD, yes, it sounds like some of the boosters are more on kind of moving in the right direction, but will we truly get that right alignment? with Auburn because you know what, they can make a pretty hefty NIL operation. They're right there near Atlanta. You can get into Florida very easily. You can turn roster, as we were just talking about, very quickly and turn into a contender, especially in the SEC, very easily in 1 or 2 cycles. And you know that's going to be the challenge for the new head coach is can you get everybody pulling in the right direction and can you flip this roster quickly? Because Auburn, when aligned, can win a national title. We have seen it
Yeah.
before. Typically, it runs off the rails after that, but we have seen it before. That'll be the challenge, I think, moving forward after this coming coaching hire.
Yeah, the last couple of coaches here, at least once, have gone undefeated. Like it is there aren't very many jobs in college football where you can say, like, even without the portal, by like just going after high school talent, you can sign enough blue chip kids to make a 14 playoff. Like you can do that, and it's interesting. I think with this particular year, this is like a generational class of like elite talent in Alabama. And Auburn, as it stands right now, not really a contender to get a lot of those. And what you brought up there, I think is the biggest key question. And it's not even just can you get everybody in alignment right now, because you might be able to get everybody in alignment immediately, especially because the AD and the president are new. And this is a fan base and a group that has enough money to be able to say, we can pay Lane Kiffin $9.5 million. And also, here's our NIL collective chest of 12 million bucks, where we're going to go out there and we're going to have a top 5 payroll.
Well, I mean, they paid $45 million in buyouts in the last 2.5 years or so. You know, like you're talking like almost $100,000 a day when you add up the staff salaries and the head coaching buyouts, all of that together. You know, I mean, this is a pretty hefty buyout operation alone. And then you mentioned that 12 to 13 million figure for their NIL collective. That is likely to tick up. You know, now once they eventually make the hire, once they kind of have all the boosters kind of moving in the right direction. So, you know, the future is kind of bright for Auburn. If you're a fan there, you've gone through some trials and tribulations, a very rocky up and down last couple of years, but I guess there is a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, and it could be quite a bright one as well.
Well, I want to talk about that last thing then, I think, before you wrap up, about having this fund, whether that's 12, 13, whether it moves up and maybe it's 15 or more. Who knows what the market rate ends up being 2 or 3 years from now. This is what is, I think, always going to be my concern or question, as so long as the NIL collective era works the way that it does right now. And there's no guarantee that it will come 2025, 2026. That's a different podcast. We've kind of alluded to it in a couple of different ways. I have had smart analysts and smart reporters say to me that part of the reason Auburn is not terribly competitive for many of those elite high school players in Alabama or in Georgia or Florida this cycle is because not only was our Harsin staff maybe not going at 3,000%, knowing that they were probably going to get fired, but also that Auburn's money was staying on the sidelines, as it were, knowing because they weren't totally bought in with this particular administration. And this is the big risk, because everybody might be on the same page now. But what if, hypothetically, some adversity hits, Nick Saban kicks your ass the first season. Maybe the initial roster turnaround doesn't happen, and very quickly. Maybe there is an economic downturn in the pressurized lumber industry, or in any, or I don't know. Tim Cook has to pay a gigantic antitrust settlement in Europe, and he's not quite liquid, right? So one of those things happen. The concern I always think here is if you have another group of people that are not technically part of the university, that have a $10 million plus fund that they're going to use for football recruiting, you can never control the entire athletic department. You now have a shadow general manager. And in the event that you have a great relationship with those people and everyone's goals are aligned, and forget NCAA rules or Alabama state law, like, because no one's checking that stuff, and you're coordinating together like a good candidate and a good super PAC, everything's fine. But we have no reason to think that is necessarily going to stay the case anywhere, let alone at a place where stability among power brokers has not been the norm for 15 years, including with some very good coaches and some very talented administrators. So that's always my concern. Like when I see a school or a fan base saying, like, we got $11 million lined up here in this, definitely not a fake charity collective LLC. To me, that isn't a selling point. It's almost a potential danger, given what happens if some relationships go sour. It speaks to a level of control that athletic director and on some level that coaching staff won't have. And you can maybe mollify, those concerns or try to mitigate that risk, but it's still going to be there. And that's not the case as it stands right now. It's not exactly the case with Alabama, and it's not the case with some other high profile elite recruiting programs.
Yeah, I would agree a little bit with that, but I mean, you got to understand this is a very cutthroat, kind of industry, especially in the SEC. This is not limited to Auburn. These issues, I will be curious, kind of tailing off with the AD change over there, if we're going to see some additional movement amongst athletic directors, amongst staff, if NIL also comes into play with them, not in terms of actually the money changing hands, but if you know that you can go to an operation that is kind of turnkey and has that NIL operation humming and things are hunky dory, versus you're struggling to raise money or you're struggling to go get those donors to do something in terms of NIL for your athletes. You know what? Maybe if it's just easier, you end up taking a job like that. Where the operation is moving in the right direction and everything is aligned on that front. So I think that's going to be interesting. And you mentioned the shadow athletic department. I mean, those things, especially at Auburn, have happened all the time. So you know what?
Yeah,
I think
I don't think it's an accident that this program hasn't done super well.
Yep.
I think because of that, the fact that Tennessee, I think, has kind of broken that cycle is a little bit of an anomaly, and maybe and this is a good story for this offseason, because I understand that I might be falling into the reporter trap of falling onto narrative when I don't have the every single reported fact and everything, because clearly not every collective is equal. And I do think it's fair to say how Aspire is operating at Tennessee, both in their sophistication and their long-term profitability goals and their ability, and who they're getting money from is different from Auburn, is different from Alabama, is different from Texas A&M, and very different from Ohio State. And how those, not just the amount of money, but the kind of donor and what they're hoping to get out of that relationship may speak to different levels of power imbalance or power sharing between donor and AD. So, if nothing else, Auburn hired a guy that knows this world really well. And I would just say, like, good luck, my man. Like, it might work, but this feels like a place that's a great job for a head football coach and maybe not the best job in the world for an athletic director.
And a good job for some agent to fill as well, given the amount of buyouts that they're getting paid in this.
This is what I'm thinking here, right? You worst case scenario, you get fired at Auburn in 4 years. You got generational wealth, baby.
Yep. Oh,
you get fired as AD, you're wealthy, but you're not sending your kids to Phillips Exeter wealthy. Like it's different buyout money.
Yeah. It is definitely a different league of buyout money. Although Jonko is getting a pretty hefty raise from what I hear on that move to Auburn. So, but you mentioned Tennessee. I think that one of the things Danny White, very early after getting hired, was get everybody moving in the right direction, not just the NIL, but in terms of the administration, in terms of really making sure that the focus was back on Tennessee, kind of eliminating some of those distractions, kind of clearing out some of those factions that really did develop when Philip Fulmer was there and in charge. I mean, there's something to be said of kind of the people skills that these ADs need nowadays to bring kind of those warring factions, whether they're warring collectives, whether they're warring, boosters, individuals that might be on your board of regents and heavily involved in athletics that are meddling a little bit too much. That is kind of the task of the modern AD nowadays is really just not just people skills for raising money, but it's people skills in terms of managing people and making sure they're all on the same page. And I give Tennessee a lot of credit. I think you brought up A&M a little bit earlier. I think that is a fascinating situation to monitor going forward, especially now that we can move off of Auburn.
Yeah, I would love to read a book about Texas A&M, just broadly over like what the last 10 years of.
Oh, I'll go way back before then, because it has been fascinating, especially as a Texas native, someone who's gone down to College Station quite a bit. It's just a unique culture, at A&M. Not even speaking about athletics.
Unique culture is, I listen. I can make this joke. The joke I'm about to make would be deeply offensive if you make it. I can make this joke. I'm kidding a little bit here. let me just say, based on my religious background, I think I am. I'm not. I'm not say. I would not say I am part of a cult. I would just say that I may be more familiar with the trappings of what somebody else might think of what that might be. Right? You can kind of get what I'm saying here. Texas A&M is like that more than very few non-religious entities in terms of ritual, in terms of secrecy, in terms of weirdness. Like I get that trope is overdone for other places. I don't think it's overdone for Aggie. That's kind of the right word to use. It's weird.
It's
Just like
definitely unique. Having gone to a football camp or two, down there back in the day, it was definitely a very eye-opening experience. If you're not completely raised and indoctrinated, I guess a little bit there in College Station, but it has gotten a little better. I think the thing about A&M and some of those places too, A&M, one of the largest schools, undergraduate schools in the country, so you can have a very diverse experience. Although amongst the diehards that are contributing millions of dollars to the athletic department, that are going to those games and midnight yell all the time, it is definitely a very different experience from somebody who's maybe just getting in and getting out and getting their degree in veterinary or school or something like that.
Yeah. No, well, yeah. That's if you want to yell at me for anything that I've said here about Texas A&M, you can of course reach me on Twitter at 38Godfrey. Send all of your feedback there. It's funny. I did accidentally kind of put my foot in my mouth at this big conference in Charlotte over the last week. It's a big collection here of people who are studying sports marketing, who have written papers about revenue generation, about ticketing, a lot about NIL. And there was, and we'll kind of wrap it up on this. Near the end, I was asked to speak on a panel, and I'm talking here with some people from One Team Partners and from some NIL consultancies and from Teamworks and other, a lot of industry people. And we're all talking with each other, and some of the students and graduate students were asking about what impact NIL has on recruiting and whether that creates an unfair advantage or whoever has the biggest budget automatically wins. And maybe I might have a little bit too informally used Texas A&M as an example of maybe having the most money on NIL doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to win, forgetting that not only does Texas A&M have like a student body of like 60,000 people at this point, they also have one of the biggest sports management departments, including the person who was like emceeing that particular event and like 60 other people in the audience. So I didn't besmirch the dog, so I was able to leave with my life. But the moral of the story here is if you're going to make fun of a school, make sure that school didn't go to that conference. I should have made fun of Rice. That would have been a little bit safer, but
a little bit safer. But we still like our Aggies. They're they're a little, they put the target on them back, but they somehow embrace it a little bit as well. And listen, if they turn it around, there will be nobody more excited for the success of Texas A&M to actually win it all than I will. So go ahead and gig them, Aggies. I'll put the thumb up. And we'll celebrate a title down in the future. But it is a fascinating test case, just given everything that has gone on at that school the last couple of decades. I mean, you throw in realignment, you go back to the days when the Longhorn Network was causing, just everybody to kind of get up in it. I mean, it seems like there's always constantly something there at the school, really dating back to the Southwest Conference days. So, you talk about, white papers and all that stuff. I would love to really sit down and drill down on some of those particulars, because A&M is one of the more unique places I think in all of college athletics, and especially so these last couple of years. And so I'm sure a few of those sports management students will be able to tell you how it really is, as long as they're subscribed to Extra Points and Going for Two, of course, though.
Yeah, the complete unofficial history of Texas A&M does sound like an excellent off-season project or interview series. Maybe we should go. We can go bring on.
We'll be down in San Antonio for the NCAA convention.
We will.
So maybe we'll pop right over. My parents live not too far from there in the San Antonio area. So maybe we'll stop by. We'll call up Ross Bjork and some of the folks there at A&M. I doubt we're going to get access to Jimbo, but
just don't show Ross the last 10 minutes of anything here that I said. I'll be on my best behavior. It'll be great. We could talk a little bit more about some of those white papers and conferences, I think, a little bit later in this week. I'm going through a few of those now, both in terms of empirical evidence and research about not just NIL amounts, but why people pick particular NIL opportunities, why they decide to disengage from the market, what that market looks like in a place like Minnesota or Michigan, and then also Maine. Was I think a useful case study. We have stuff about equity in NIL, and also some, for a dork like me, fascinating research about signage and sponsorships and revenue generation, and how maybe some schools are actually leaving quite a bit of money on the table. We can talk about that some more. And of course, on Extra Points over the past couple of days, I published a little bit of what I've heard about EA Sports College Football. We can also talk about that a little bit on Friday, because I talked to some other people in the licensing world that tend to have more intel on project timelines and what things are happening. And of course, you can find the rest of our video content with Collegiate Sports Connect and Bryan's other show, HeadCoachU, where he has brought in some other experts to share some information about how their programs are operating and what insights they have about some of the big issues in college athletics, from recruiting to roster management to managing culture to hiring people. You can find all of that on HeadCoachU. Bryan, have I forgotten to plug anything else?
I think that might just cover it. I mean, you mentioned head coach you. We had Jeff Monken on, the Army head coach this week, and it's Army Air Force Week. We'll see that on Saturday. The Commander in Chief's trophy is on the line, so it was kind of fun to talk to them about that, about what goes into life on the academy, the kind of student athletes that he recruits. Obviously, a ton of lessons on leadership that he shared with Bronco and I. So a very fun head coach you episode this week, and I think folks will really enjoy that. We had one with Tim Murphy, a Harvard's head coach, the winningest coach in the Ivy League. Before that, a lot of future guests as well that I think folks will be excited about. So make sure you not only subscribe to that, on Collegiate Sports Connect had a couple of interviews. We do some unique search insights on. You mentioned Maine earlier. We have the Maine president on Collegiate Sports Connect talking about that AD opening. I have one coming soon about the Mississippi State and Auburn openings, and how that one search filled and impacted the other. So a lot of good stuff this week on Collegiate Sports Connect, and of course you can find it all on the D1 Ticker at the start and end of every day.
That's right, folks. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking with us. I'll share a little bit more context about this episode on Extra Points, finishing up a couple of pretty big back-end investments there too. I hope you'll be able to see it soon. Thanks for listening. We'll catch up with you guys soon.